Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me today would typically be Michael Becker, but he is, again, doing due diligence. That guy, hardest working guy I know. So sitting in the podcast today, again, also with Old Capital, James Zhang. Hello, James. How are you?
Hey, Paul. Doing great.
So we're going to go into the podcast here with some friends of ours that we've known for a long period of time. So I think the theme of this is good things come to those that wait. So Jody and JD Ambrose are real estate investors. For the last few years, they have looked at several apartment buildings before deciding on the right property to buy. They looked at smaller properties. They looked at larger properties. They looked at chiller properties, individual HVAC. They looked at flat roofs. They looked at pitch roofs. They looked at older buildings and then some newer buildings. So they looked at all bills paid, and they looked at properties that had tenants paying most of the utilities through a RUBS program. So they looked at properties that were different in different towns. Some were over 2 hours away, and then they looked at properties right around the corner and down the street from their home. So just like Goldilocks, they had to find the right transaction. So that's, good things come to those that wait. So if you don't find something today, it's all right to continue your search for your deal. So I want to talk a little bit about their journey and what they learned over the last couple of years. So welcome to the podcast, Jody and JD Ambrose.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thanks, Paul.
So
Thanks,
Jody is the father, JD is the son, and this is a family partnership. JD, what's it like to work for Dad?
Well, it's got all the pros and cons that you would really think, but my dad is an incredibly gifted businessman, and to have the privilege of learning from him from the myriad experiences that he's had in his professional career, one-on-one, is something that I couldn't place a value.
No, you're absolutely right, and I've known these guys for a long period of time. Not been weeks or months. We've been together for years.
Yeah, coming up on 5 years since we started working together.
Yeah, a long time. So, JD, you talk a little bit about your dad's background. Let's hear a little bit about Jody's background professionally, and then a little bit about the family and the real estate the family was into back in the 50s and 60s.
Okay. I went to TCU and had a love for real estate through my parents at that time, having built duplexes and apartments and single-family houses. So I got my real estate degree or certification there at TCU and won the Henry S. Miller Scholarship Award, which was the first one that had been established at TCU.
Wow. And
just continued that on. I did go to SMU, got a law degree and an MBA because I love business and wanted to do a very sophisticated law practice, so to speak.
We'll start off on that part because you guys are Fort Worth guys, but you went to school over at SMU, so that's like the north and the south, or the east and the west. So tell us a little bit about being Fort Worth guys with college degrees, professional degrees from SMU. What's that like?
Well, SMU is a wonderful school, but I will bleed TCU purple all my life. There's just no question about that. And unfortunately, TCU didn't have a law school, so that wasn't an option for me.
I see. So tell us a little bit more about, Mom and Dad had gotten into the duplexes and some development stuff around the Fort Worth area back in the 50s or 60s, was it?
Back in the 60s, yes. And they were very forward-looking in things and saw a need for older folks, not being real old, but I mean folks who the family had moved out and they were looking to have a really nice place, but didn't want to go to an apartment, so to speak. So they filled that niche with some extremely nice duplexes that were very large, but downsized from the large houses that these people had been in, and then built an apartment townhouse kind of situation that had 16 units that was very upscale near Rivercrest Country Club, and it did very, very well.
Did you inherit that property? Did you manage it? Did you have some background on that?
We ended up selling that property. I worked on that while I was in high school and college and did a lot of learning there. Actually managed a crew of 3 other friends as we did various things. So I learned the construction side of things and was always curious to ask the various trades what was going on so that I could learn things from them.
That's great. Let's bring it over to James and let's start some questions.
So going from that, you finished your degrees at SMU and TCU. What did you do professionally? Maybe give us a little bit of that and then move into you guys starting to look at multifamily.
When I graduated from law school, went to work for a law firm in Fort Worth and practiced law there for 2 years. Ended up going to work for one of my clients, which was a security issue problem, but they were in oil and gas. And that's basically what my dad did for a living. The real estate was just something that they loved doing and did that every opportunity that they could. So from the oil and gas company, when they sold out, went to work for my dad and spent 10 years with him. And we ended up selling that 16-unit complex and bought property downtown Fort Worth and rehabbed it, bought a vacant building and a hotel, and got into doing all types of renovations for those and ended up selling those. And that's when I left Dad. He was ready to retire. And so he retired and I went to work for one of the Bass Brothers organizations that was liquidating $22 billion worth of real estate from a failed savings and loan in California. And from them went to work for Richard Rainwater when he started his Crescent Real Estate Investment Trust, which is the REIT that did so well.
So those are some of the two biggest owners, operators of real estate in the country. You know, the Bass Brothers, which is an unbelievable learning platform to be on.
Oh, it was.
And then being tied with Richard Rainwater. Unfortunately, he just passed away end of last year, beginning of this year.
I believe. Yeah.
And he owned lots of real estate throughout the country and with his wife too, Darla. And they did really well. So an unbelievable platform really for you to learn from.
It was a great platform and some of the smartest and brightest people to ever be around. And we were one of those who was considered that 800-pound gorilla because of Richard's name. And there wasn't anything that we couldn't do. Most people are familiar with the Woodlands, which is a massive complex down just north of Houston. Mm-hmm. And we were given 30 days to buy that property. So if you can imagine trying to do due diligence on shopping centers, apartments, country club, single-family houses, undeveloped land, office buildings, and then look at all the personnel and everything. And we actually accomplished that and bought that property, which I know that Mr. Mitchell, regretted probably selling to us. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he thought we could ever do what we did in 30 days, but it was our ability to have the best and the brightest, and then to have already made contacts with people who could help us and pre-qualify them for events like this so that when we called, they knew exactly what we wanted and what we needed. And so having prepped them well in advance paid big dividends when the day came and we needed them.
Talk about the timeline sort of transitioning from those professional into sort of multifamily for you guys. How did you make that transition? And then talk about sort of when that occurred in terms of year.
Okay. I left the corporate world in February of 2012 and took a couple of months off to do some things with my parents' estate and my wife's parents' estates to get them all fixed up and everything. And I had the urge to get back into real estate and thought that I wanted to do single families as, an individual and would do that. It was something my wife could help me with some decorating and all. And then I started looking around and found Lifestyles and some other groups and attended that and basically found out that with the financial income that we had, that we would do better doing the multifamily. And so that's when we started looking at the multifamily and really had wanted to buy our first property in basically March of 2013. Unfortunately, we were outbid or second in line with Nick Fluellen, but Paul called and said, "Hey guys, might have an opportunity for you." one of the lead investors had backed out, and so they were anxious to close their Fannie Mae loan. It would give us our Fannie Mae gold card, as Paul says. Mm-hmm. And so we took him up on the opportunity, and it was our first foray into multifamily at that time.
So let me just go backwards for 1 second. You said that you joined Lifestyles, and Lifestyles, again, is an educational mentoring company. Did you find educational mentoring to be something that you would recommend before people go in to invest in multifamily properties, whether it's Lifestyles or other companies? Do you need specific knowledge to get into multifamily?
I have always found that knowledge is worth everything that you really pay for it, if it's good information. Mm-hmm. And so I would highly advise folks, you can self-educate yourself, but you're going to make a whole lot of mistakes. That a little bit of education, talking with people. And what I really wanted to do was to find who were the good vendors. I wanted to jumpstart my business, so to speak. And so education was the fastest and best way to do that.
I want to bring JD in on maybe this question. So taking me back to 2013, 2014, where were you in sort of the process? And then how did your dad bring you in? And what did you learn during that time?
I've pretty much been with Winstead Enterprises from its beginning. I was a Texas A&M graduate of 2009, had the welcome privilege of an economy that was not too friendly to new graduates. So I was working high-end retail out of college, and at that time I was looking for our first home, and at the time Dad was considering doing the fix and flip and rental business in single family. So he offered me an opportunity to come on with him and get into single family rentals. And by the time I got back from a vacation, I was told, no, we're doing apartments. And that was pretty much Labor Day of 2012. And it's been hit the ground running ever since.
What do you think in terms of the education piece? What has helped the most in the process in the last couple of years in terms of education for you?
I definitely have to agree with Dad's. He likes to not reinvent the wheel. So if there are men or women out there who have done what it is that you want to do, to glean as much wisdom as you can from them, concluding that it is the right wisdom and they've done things and learned from their mistakes and they're not continuing to repeat those bad habits. But just watching him and learning from him has been the most beneficial from my perspective.
Okay, so starting in 2013, you guys started investing more as a limited partner in deals. Maybe talk about one of those as an example of, getting to ride sort of in the back of the airplane and learn from the captain of the airplane. So
we can start with Villa France, and basically Nick and John McKnight were the leads on that property, and they were both very, very familiar with real estate and how to run properties and do things. And I think one of the key things that we picked up immediately was that if you don't have the right people in place, you're really going nowhere. And as soon as we discovered that we didn't have those people in, they took action to get the right people in, and it made all the difference in that property, and that property turned around overnight. I mean, it was phenomenal.
Is that property management, or what? When you say
it was property management, okay. Maintenance people, vendors, just everybody who would be involved in working on that property is a key person. And so that's why it's always very important, at least for us, to have taken the time outside of before you buy a property to sit down and visit with property management companies, understand their philosophy, let them understand yours, see if there's a good match there, talk with vendors, talk with folks that will be doing your rehab, all of those, so that when that opportunity does come, you're not starting way behind schedule and trying to look for these people. You already have them as people that you want to do business with.
So you got to see it from sort of a passive perspective, seeing the way the general partners ran their property management companies and saw which ones you liked and which ones you didn't.
Very much so,
okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then let's move into, in July, you guys closed on your first property as a general partner. maybe tell us about the process, because a lot of people think, similar to single family, they decide they want to do multifamily and they think they're going to close in the first month on a deal. So maybe give us some insight on the process and what you guys went through sort of before the acquisition, then we can get into the actual acquisition.
Well, when we first joined Lifestyles back, Dad joined in August, I joined in September when I came back from a vacation. Our goal was to make sure that we'd interviewed and vetted everybody that we wanted to be on our team. So that way, when we put that first offer out there, we weren't scrambling around to find, what general contractor do we want? What SEC attorney do we want? Who do we want working on our team? So build that Rolodex and find who it is that you want to be first in line. And if you don't have the first option, then you need to have at least 2 backup options to ensure that when that Pineview does come around, which is the syndication that we closed on July 5th, that you're not stuck scrambling trying to find who it is that needs to complete your professional team.
So how many properties did you guys look at before Pineview?
I think that's a good question. I want to hear the answer to that question.
I think Dad has lost more hairs on his head than properties that we have done underwriting.
So maybe an easier question is, what did you like about this property that set it apart from some of the other ones that you had walked before?
It was a true off-market deal, number one. That is something in today's market that is rare. And to say rare, even the ones that guys say they've got off-market, they've shopped it around to several different buyers. And this was an opportunity to work with somebody that we had a very personal relationship with, that he had a personal relationship with the seller's broker. And it was just something that I jumped on, and it was either going to be sink or swim, because I didn't exactly have the blessing of the Godfather when I executed that LOI in his name.
It did come as a little bit of a shock when I saw that we had executed an LOI and I hadn't had quite the opportunity to review all the financials.
So what did JD maybe talk about why you were so quick, besides it being off market? What did you like about the property, maybe the submarket, the rents where they were, and sort of the pricing? Talk about that.
All of those, James. The rents continue to be underperforming, and we've got a great team of girls in the office right now who are getting $75 over market rent right now. And given the guidance that I had with our management company, that is above and beyond what our initial thoughts were. And it's purely, given the right circumstances, just ask for it. And that's what we've done. And we're going to prove to the tenants at Pineview that these women in the office, they're their number one amenity. And then it's going to be our maintenance guys. And then it's going to be the interiors of their units. And it's about the team creating the home that they want in their apartment unit.
All right, let's talk a little bit about this property, because I'm familiar with it. The property's over in Garland, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas. It's 152 units. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes.
The property was built in 1969 or so.
Yes.
Is it flat roof, pitched roof?
Flat roof.
All right, flat roof, individually metered, chiller system. How is it?
Electricity is individually metered. Water is master metered.
Okay.
And gas is master metered.
So,
And it's boilers with individual HVACs on the roof.
So you knew about the Garland submarket. You liked the Garland submarket, and what was the reason why you liked the Garland submarket? Because of the tenant mix over there? Is it next to a couple other multifamily properties in and around that area?
The tenant mix is pretty ideal for the Texas market. It's a little bit Hispanic, a little bit Asian, and both of those tend to be very family oriented, which is a property aspect that we want. And there are 2 elementary schools. One is behind the north section and one is behind the south section. And that just gives us an opportunity to promote those as conveniences for the families that live on site.
Okay.
And in addition, there's a massive public park just across the street.
Yeah, it's a huge
with
park.
more amenities than any complex could possibly provide on its own.
Okay.
And so you guys are going to come in, purchase the property in July. How much rehab do you plan on spending in the first year? And then what's that rehab going to be spent on?
In the first year, let's say $200,000 probably. And that is to right some of the wrongs that a 1969 construction property has, and then to go in and fine-tune what it is that the tenants are willing to pay for in terms of upgrades. We just went out and toured Exponential Property Materials, or Exponential Property Group's manufacturing side, and picked out some of the tile that they have, the flooring that they have, and look forward to getting our rehab budget set up with them to start this train.
What's our occupancy on the property?
We are 8 vacant units right now, so that's right around 95, 96%.
Okay. On this property, you said it's family oriented. Is there swing sets, anything that the kids can use? Is there a pool on the property?
It is comprised of 3 smaller complexes split on Walnut and Garland, and all of those pools have been filled in, but there is a large city park that is directly across the street from the south section, and there is a massive playground that is larger than most that you would see on most elementary schools. There's a huge field. There's I don't want to call it a covered gazebo, but it's almost like an outdoor entertaining space that the families, once we start promoting that as one of the conveniences for the property, we will.
Okay, so let's kind of walk through the due diligence of the property. You guys had a signed LOI. The seller accepted the LOI, and now it's time to do physical due diligence in the property. Was there anything that you found physical due diligence on 1969 property with flat roofs that anything that stood out that you had any questions or concerns with?
I think the first thing that you worry about with flat roof is just it's a flat roof.
Right.
And we did find that the roof was fairly new, had been redone within the last 5 years, had a good 15-year warranty on it, was in great shape. So we were very pleased with that. We did find that some of the boiler equipment and other equipment on site was old. Mm-hmm. It was showing its age. And so we factored in some rehab money that just to set aside in case we had to replace one a little bit sooner than what we thought we might need to. With regard to the amenities, with pools being filled in and all, we're starting to look at other ways that we can complement the amenities of the large park. Maybe having a better outdoor area, or having a party room, and having some outdoor gas grills with some covered space for the kids and the parents.
How are you guys managing the property? Is it third party, or are you guys doing it by yourself? How are you guys managing it?
It's managed by third party, by John Redden and Devonshire, and they're doing an outstanding job.
And how many properties does John and his team manage?
I don't know exactly how many properties, but I think it's about 8,600 units.
Yeah, he's a big property manager.
He's a big player, and just a super nice guy, and his people are very high quality.
Yeah, he's a sharp guy. We need to get him on some period of time. But you got him on the first part of the due diligence, and so he walked all the units, or you walked many of the units, him and his team?
His team walked every unit, and I think at least twice, if not more so, in trying to help us put together budgets and all. And when I say twice, it wasn't necessarily the same people, but different people that he would help send over to help us analyze what was going on.
So he did a market survey and a study around the area to kind of determine whether rents are for similar sized properties in the same submarket and same age, and if it was updated, what you could get for rents on the property. Did John do that and his team?
John and his team did that for us also. And that's why we say, find out who you want to use well in advance, because if we had waited until the day before to pick our property management team, we would have missed out on all of that expertise, all of the help for the transition. They looked at every lease, every file. They knew the property probably as well as we did.
Okay.
So
you said you guys, this was your first syndication. Maybe talk about raising equity and how many investors you had in this deal.
raising equity is always an interesting thing. And so that's like interviewing your vendors, property management, lawyers, those folks. You need to be talking with a lot of people about their interest. Is their interest in line with your interest? And so based on that, we have 2 LLCs that invested in the entity, and those are made up of a lot of family members and others. And then we have another single individual. So it's just really those 3 entities that are involved in our setup. So it's very simple, very easy for us to manage. But of course, communication with your investors is always a major key. Keep them very well informed about what you're doing, how you're doing, the good news and the bad. They just want to know.
So it's been about 2 months since you guys closed. Any big surprises after closing that maybe you didn't find in due diligence?
They're always pretty clean. Well, there are always surprises. We had found a lot of things that we knew we had to fix. And so from that standpoint, we already had a fairly long list of things. But as you go through, I think the bigger surprises came in sometimes what personnel qualifications were and getting those squared away. We're still in the process. We have an excellent property manager now. We have an excellent leasing agent now, but we lost our 2 maintenance men. And so we're in the process of trying to find those. We found an individual at the moment from a tip agency that we would offer a job in a heartbeat. Eddie knows that, and he's great, but we still need another. And because of the amount of being a 69 property, I'm not sure that a whole lot had ever been thrown away from 69. So a lot of it's just been cleaning things out and then being creative and saying, my gosh, we really have a large space here. What can we do with that? And that's how we've come up with the party room concept that we might be able to lease out and to do things that would add an amenity to the property.
So you've closed on the property, and now you have a third party property management company managing the asset. What is your roles right now? What do you guys do to asset manage the property?
Well, JD has taken the lead, and we're trying to refine our repairs and the things that we want to do and the timing of which those need to be done in accordance with our Fannie Mae and Daugherty mortgage loans. And in fact, we'll be sitting down as soon as this is over and going over all the bids that we have in to make that final decision, hopefully this afternoon, and get started on all of the work that needs to be done.
So what's next after, probably about the next 3 or 4 months, once the property is stabilized, a lot of the rehab's done, and you've got your personnel in place? What's next for you guys? Is it more general partners or looking at limited partners? What's your plan for the next year or so?
I think the plan is to continue looking at syndicating, and we would love to get something in Fort Worth, but that has not been where...
Because this is a drive. It's what, 35 miles?
It's 45, 55 miles, depending on how traffic is one way. So I enjoy the commute because it is a welcome change, having been a passive investor in the past, but it certainly takes a toll on one and their personal and family life.
So what do you think about that? I mean, you guys have been passive investors in several transactions in the past. Now you're the guy, you're the managing member, you're the guys that are putting the deal together, you guys that are overseeing the asset. I mean, what kind of a mindset change has that been from being on the side of the big show to actually being in the big show, running the deal?
The major thing, I think, is that if it's going to get done, I'm the one that needs to initiate it getting done. Otherwise, nobody else is going to do it. As being a passive, you're relying on whoever that general partner was to make those decisions and to make them correctly for the investor group. And now it's up to us. And so JD is spending virtually every day over at the property, and I'm there quite a bit. But he's taken the lead on getting certain units cleaned up, fixed. We bought it, and it had a couple of units that had been damaged by fire. And so one of his primary things has been to get those units repaired, fixed up, get them inspected so that we can get them all back on the rent rolls.
What do you guys think the most challenging part of the business is right now for you guys?
I would say handling those expectations of others, because so many of them are unspoken, and you have to be good at interpersonal skills, reading the nonverbal keys as to what it is somebody's saying behind the words based on their expressions and mannerisms.
So is that investors or is that personnel on the property?
All of the above.
Or renters or everybody?
Well,
it's a people business.
It's a people business, and people have sometimes unrealistic expectations. And because of that, you need to greatly try to curtail those where they've gone off on a tangent or something. And it's very similar to with investors, which is what we're really talking about here so much. And that is, you can't promise your investor, a 50% return monthly. Now, that's just not going to happen.
Right.
So don't lead them toward those expectations. Lead them to the realistic. And what JD and I like to do is to basically underpromise and overperform. And we're conservative in our estimates. And we talked earlier about how surprised I was about JD's numbers when I saw the LOI. And I will have to say, he was very conservative when he made that offer. And as we went through the process and were able to tweak numbers, the entire project just became better and better and better. Mm-hmm. And so it was something that in the end, we can't afford not to buy this kind of a deal. So he did an outstanding job.
So you guys have been doing this for 4 or 5 years. Is there anything maybe in the last year that you've changed your mind about on multifamily?
I would have to say that it's probably the state of the DFW market, and what 5 years ago looked like it was the peak then, and then in 13 and 14 and 15 and 16, I think we are definitely in a heated market, but I don't know so much that this isn't the new normal, where 69 construction goes for 875. And that's just, it's the nature of the beast. People are coming here. People need a place to live, and owners know that. And prospective buyers need to be prepared for that.
And I would agree. I think that we live in a very, very wonderful area for multifamily investing. And I think the market will continue, from all that I can find out and from people that I listen to, for some time, as the millennials still not that much into single family housing at all and looking at apartments and everything else. And so that drives things from the very top, down toward our C-class property. And we're very fortunate for that. And we also think that doing the family-oriented type complex lends itself quite well, because family-oriented people tend to police the property better, keep everybody more in line, and make great recommendations to their friends because it's a good place. And we want it to be, a great place for the people who can be there.
A lot of investors that we talk with get pretty itchy and they want to buy something in that first 30, 60, 90 days. Any advice for those people going sort of from zero to your first deal?
Trust the numbers. Numbers don't lie, and emotions are fleeting.
And as the old saying goes, don't let that money burn a hole in your pocket. There are a number of things that you need to look at. And as JD said, the numbers aren't going to lie. Spend time doing that.
Yeah, it took a number of years to try to step up, but I think that's part of the discipline, is that there would be a number of Excel reports that would come over my desk from JD saying, what do you think about this? And I'd say, it looks pretty good. Well, I don't think so. Because I just don't see how these numbers are going to make sense in the future. I don't know how rents are going to get up this far. So you guys have the money, you guys have had the equity put into a deal, but you've also had the discipline to make a decision whether you wanted to go forward or not, and not just be part of the euphoria of multifamily. You wanted to make sure that the deal that you guys were going to put the family money into was going to be the right deal for everybody, to make sense. And so I think that's great to have keep your powder dry and just don't emotionally get into these deals. Just kind of make sure the numbers do make sense. So I give you a lot of credit. But in the meantime, you guys had done other investments too. This wasn't,
We have.
Yeah, you guys hadn't just waited for 4 or 5 years. You guys had got into a lot of different other things, but this is the multifamily piece of your investment activity. So tell us a little bit more about the loan. I mean, I think JD talked a little bit about it. Jody, you talked a little bit about it. We don't know very much about what the future is going to hold, but we also want to make sure that we have a loan maturity that's pretty far out. And we didn't want to do something that was a 2-year or 5-year or even a 7-year maturity, because we just don't know when the music's going to stop. So we want to go out as far as we can. Tell us a little bit about the Fannie Mae loan and why you chose the Fannie Mae loan, or what were the benefits to you?
Well, first of all, I have to say thank you, Paul, for your great assistance and Old Capital's assistance in putting us together with Daugherty Mortgage and then getting us the right Fannie Mae loan and all. We did go with a 12-year loan, which gave us enough time because we knew we were going to spend a couple of years having to rehab and bring everything back up to speed. It would probably take us a couple of years to get all of the leases up to what we thought was true market rates.
Yeah.
And then we would like to have a couple of years of just that really nice cash flow for the investors. And so then in that year 5, 6, something like that, make a decision. Do we want to hold this for a longer term, or are we interested in selling, taking a profit and reinvesting it in another multifamily? With a 7-year loan, that wouldn't have left anyone an opportunity to really take advantage of that because of the assumption requirements that Fannie Mae has. And so getting a 12-year loan was ideal from a time frame standpoint for us. We were also able to negotiate a 3-year interest only, which provides us with, again, additional funds to put back into the property, which we hope will help maybe accelerate our rehab process and get those rents up quicker. And then we got a very nice interest rate, 4.58. So, and that was delightful because we got a call that morning saying that the rate had locked and everything, and a call that afternoon saying that it had gone up another 0.8 or so in that one day. So we felt very fortunate for that. And again, just working with Paul and the folks with Daugherty, they're great people and really know what they're doing and have your best interest at heart. And so we do thank you guys for that.
Thanks for saying that. That's very kind. James, anything else to talk about here?
Anything that we missed or that you want to leave with our listeners? You can maybe leave with some final words, and then what's the best way for them to reach out to you if they have any questions about the specific deal, or
and any funny stories since you've bought a property that you can tell.
I'm drawing a blank, but I'm looking around the table and it looks like there's something I'm supposed to tell. So what am I not?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure I want to tell any funny stories about the
maybe
the
just an
complex
email
at the
number
moment.
then.
Yeah.
Email and phone number would work
So,
then. Yeah.
I want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to come on to the podcast. Appreciate that. And let me make it clear, while we started in Lifestyles, and Lifestyle is a great group, there are other real estate groups out there and other mentoring groups. So you need to just check them out for yourself and see what it is. If you want to get in touch with me, it's Jody Ambrose, JodyAmbrose at Winstead Enterprises, Winsteadenterprises.com. Wow.
We'll have that. We'll have that in the show notes.
We will.
And mine is JD at WinsteadHoldings.com.
That's a little easier to do. So, guys, thanks for coming in. We appreciate you tell a good story about waiting for the right one to come along. So that's great. James, what else is going on in the Old Capital world?
A couple things. If you haven't gotten our 15-page white paper, you can go on to oldcapitalpodcast.com and request that. And if you haven't registered for our conference, it's going to be Thursday, October 5th, and you can register at the website as well.
the Old Capital Podcast. Don't forget to check that out. We appreciate it. Then also, too, if you think we have quality podcasts, make sure you rate in iTunes. Give me a 5-star. We appreciate that. James and I and Michael, we do appreciate you spending some time listening to us and getting some insights of what's going on in the multifamily business. So again, JD and Jody Ambrose, thanks for coming in and spending some time with us. We appreciate that.
Thank you guys for having us.
James Eng, always a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.